This exercise is going to come from our textbook, and it's going to start on page 51. The first thing you need to do is download and locate the Squash and Stretch Ball Animate file. When you launch Animate and open up this file, you'll notice that it's going to be a little bit different from what the book is expecting you to have. The major difference is I've added a background to this ball, and our ball is going to be blue. If you look up at our timeline, here's the way it's set up. The background will simply be a solid static background by itself, and we're not going to move it around or do much to it. On the ball layer, you've got 3 different keyframes, and it's going to animate the blue ball from the top position all the way down and then back up, with some easing in and out in between both of those. So let's get started. Now the first thing we want to do is to add some squashing to our ball as soon as it hits the bottom of the floor. So I'm going to select our second keyframe, and this is the keyframe at the lowest point, and to make the transformation, I'm going to choose my free transform tool. Now whenever you select your free transform tool, notice that it has a nice bounding box going around it, and the main thing to remember is by default, any transformation you make is going to be made relative to wherever this white point is. So in this case, since it's in the center, whatever I do to one side is also going to happen to the other. Later on, we'll talk about ways to overcome that. One of the first quickest ways to overcome it is by turning on your free transform panel so you can dial in exactly what you want. If you don't see your free transform panel over within your palettes, you can always go up to Window and down to Transform. Notice Command T was the keyboard shortcut. And from here, you can type in exactly what you want to do to any object that you have selected. In the book, it's going to tell you to make sure that it's unlinked or unconstrained. You always want to have it unconstrained, therefore you can type in 2 independent values for each one. So for this horizontal or the width value, we're going to type in 120%, and for the height, we're going to dial in 80%. In other words, we're knocking it up 20% and down 20%. By doing that, when we hit return, you can see how this will squash down and pull out the ball. Remember, the key concept when adding squash and stretch is that whatever you do to the height, you also have to inversely do it to the width. So if we squash it down, we need to stretch it out. Now if we go up to our timeline and try to test our animation, you can see we've got a unique problem. If I scrub back to our first frame and then slowly step it forward, you can see how our ball is starting to squash as it falls. And as it returns back up, it will return from a squash back to the normal state. What we really want it to do is to stretch out as it falls and only squash on that middle frame as it hits the ground. So what we need to do is we need to hijack the timeline and add a couple of more keyframes before and after the stretching or the squashing effect in order to add a stretching effect. So here's how we're going to do this. Going up to your timeline, select the keyframe that's just before it starts to flatten out, and we're going to insert another keyframe. So I'm going to hit F6, and we've got a new one there. This is our new keyframe. And let's go down to our ball, and we're going to make an adjustment to stretch it out. So with it selected, let's open up again our transform panel. And in this case, we're going to make the width of it 80% and the height of it 120%, and hit return for that. Now you can see that it's nice and stretched out. Now if we go up to test our animation, you can see how it will go to stretch as it falls, and as soon as it hits that middle keyframe, it squashes out. And so the next thing we want to do is to have the next keyframe be stretched back up as it returns to the top. Now in order to do this, we want to have the exact same stretching motion that appeared in the frame just before it hits the ground. So to copy that, let's go to our timeline, select that last keyframe just before it makes contact. If you hold down Control or right click on it, you can choose to copy the frames. Now copying a frame is very different from just copying the object itself or doing a Command C. This is going to get the entire frame state. We can then go back to our timeline and choose the frame after our squash, so this one here. Hold down Control and click on it, and then we can do a paste frames. And this will give us the exact same frame and the starting point going back up with it nice and stretched, returning. There is one particular issue with this. In this state, as it moves from the top down, this is going to have an easing out type of tween, or for their tween. In this state, we want to have it easing in. And since we copied the frames, we need to go back and adjust that. So with this keyframe selected, go to your tweening. Under the type, we're going to choose just a classic ease, and we're going to do positive 100 for the intensity. This is going to ease out for this. So now we can test our movie by hitting return, and it returns up, down, and back up. If you do command return, this will show you the ball bouncing the way it is right here. With that done, this is all that we're going to do for this exercise. You can now go up to File and Save your document to turn it in.